Hello, everybody. Welcome to the thing that I ended up titling "How to Give Ed Take Feedback with ThePrimeagen Bashbunni Teach DV parentheses exclamation point prime exclamation point bash exclamation point teach." If you don't know all of us, that's your fault. Figure it out. There's commands. You're welcome.
Speaking of feedback, I gotta be right back.
Okay, there you go. I will set the stage. GG to Prime. Probably going to pee in the woods outside of his own house. As he does.
He doesn't really have woods. He's got pastures.
That's true. He just pees in the pastures. There's a bathroom. There's a bathroom in the workshop, and he pees out the door next to the bathroom in the workshop. One of the most astounding acts of degeneracy I've ever seen. Only from a Vim Rust kind of guy. Anyway, so for those of you who don't know the context for this came up in kind of a weird way. This was a Twitter thread, kind of. I forget what the exact start of it was.
It was. I literally linked it. In my event because I'm so organized. I'll paste it in chat.
Okay, we get it, Bash. And by that I mean please send me the link and then I'll open it.
I'll paste it in chat.
Put the camera in OBS. Why?
Okay.
Hi, you can start again.
I can only paste it once because I don't have permission to paste more than. I gotta wait 30 seconds.
Oh, is it like that?
You didn't make Bash a VIP yet, Rox?
Oof.
Bash isn't a VIP? Oh god, hold on. The stream's going dark.
I'm not a VIP or a mod. I'll take mod. I'll
hide this.
I wanted to run a poll anyway, for the record.
Yeah, let Bash be mod then. Do it.
Okay, there you go. I think I did it.
I do like this. This was a very spicy tweet. I was very.
This was a pretty spicy
tweet. Oh yeah.
I do like a good spice one.
Are you on now? Okay, cool. So this is the tweet for context. I'm gonna just put this over all of our heads, I guess, because we need this. Or I'll put it to one side. So Prime, do you want to kind of? I feel like the right way to do this is sort of to kind of go back through this, and just kind of get the conversation started where we actually started it, so that everybody has enough context to where we're all coming from here. So I almost want to go kind of tweet by tweet down our own little list here, and just kind of introduce the conversation as we were having it. So,
heck yeah.
Prime, do you want to kind of give your initial take here from? I could show off the initial tweet. So this was the tweet that Prime was responding to. Was pull requests are for collaboration. Bad comments are LGTM, move brace to next line. This code is so bad, do X instead. Good comments are great variable names. Is X intentional? And can we add a comment why? This code is called twice. Can it be a function? And Prime goes, people are too sensitive. All lowercase. So
first off, that's the meta. You don't use uppercase variables. You can just tell right away.
Not even 1 out of 2, even. You know what I mean? Just
not even a 1 over 2. That's how you know he's not even taking it seriously. I'll cover my own head with the tweet.
All right, so let me give. I'm gonna give pretty much every little bit I can, or nothing away, but just try to give the most direct way I can describe this. So that way, I don't know how we want to do this conversation, but. My general thought is that I've seen on Twitter multiple times where people are trying to describe how people should do pull requests. And the main emphasis is not on hurting someone else's feelings, but at the exact same time, a lot of the things that they're telling you to do are so minute, and it seems to focus significantly more on nits or compliments as opposed to really constructive, better feedback. And so just to throw out my cards, if somebody makes a PR and I just think that it kind of looks like maybe they were just working through a problem and it just comes out in such a way that it just kind of looks like a real, a working but was in progress PR, I will simply say, hey, this code is not good. You should just, can you just retry this again? Take what you've learned and, restructure it because all of it doesn't meet a standard we need, as opposed to going line by line or function by function and just taking it all apart where I'm effectively writing it for them, but via comments.
Cool.
I also only work with senior engineers, to be fair. So everyone knows I work with people that I might actually be the youngest on my team at 36.
That's a super important note, actually, because I think a lot of this is really aimed towards junior engineers, because I think that's where this is going to be a lot more significant. Okay, so Bash,
so I tried to give no indication on my feelings or anything. So keep going.
We'll
I have
get
lots
there
to
as
say.
we go along. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I want to get
Yeah.
through this thread. Sebastian, you want to take us through this one?
Yeah. So I think I agree with Prime. So one thing that I've seen a lot in professional settings is where I've seen it both in leaders and in people working in teams is where they let their ego get in the way of their performance. And I mean that in the sense of like if people are on a team, they basically won't take you'll see it as like they won't take responsibility for something that went wrong. I do think that this I do think that this also translate to like the work environment, but I'll mention that later. And then I've also seen it where it gets in the way with the management. So management ends up being the type to like throw their own people under the bus instead of taking accountability and saying, okay, yeah, like this is the team that I'm leading. Obviously this went wrong. Like, let's have a meeting and like discuss how we could improve that and prevent that from happening again. But what I've seen a lot is like, I guess, yeah, when the ego gets like a little bit too in there, people end up taking feedback really personally instead of having it just be a reflection of their work. So that's kind of my thoughts on this. I honestly think that all those bad comments look great and all the good comments look kind of unnecessary. Like the second one where it's like, is X intentional? Can we add a comment? Why? Like why not just say like, oh, like that it's not super obvious what that function is meant to be doing. Maybe it should be a more descriptive name instead of adding more comments to your code. Or like, yeah. So that's kind of what I think.
Cool. Okay. And then I came in here and had a different take than most people, which resulted in now we're having an entire podcast. So this is the part where it got fun, which is basically my entire segment here is like I read a book one time and it basically said that people could get that's literally
was it when
how
you
I started
were working
this.
at Facebook or no? Was it like before or after that? That's just
It was
like,
actually
listen, your accomplishments.
Things I did. Worked at Facebook, read a book. This is my entire life's achievements. This book is on my resume.
Can't relate. No, I'm just kidding.
I
read, I swear.
Reading's for nerds. Absolutely not. So basically, the kind of thing that I came across in this book was like the premise of, and this is mostly coming from the like perspective of I am baby junior engineer. If people are mean to me, I will be big sad, and kind of just trying to explain how that sort of comes along, which is like the TLDR of everything that I said is that people talking about things that you did can very easily, if you're not confident, hit you on a level of identity. And so even if they're not trying to talk about you, it can feel like they're talking about you because you're not very confident. And so you have a tendency to kind of like apply the feedback to your whole life, to your whole self, instead of just to what they said. And as you get more confident, this like kind of goes down, right? It's like Prime talking with a bunch of senior engineers isn't going to have that struggle as much as somebody who has a team of 3 junior engineers. But that can really start to mess people up. And I kind of just spent a few tweets saying that. And then Teach comes in. Teach, you can kind of...
A few tweets, by the way, is a slight
I think there were
understatement,
3.
Isn't it? Maybe you define 5 to 9 as a few. Anyway, sorry.
He was
One,
replying to other people. He
2.
initially had only 2 or 3, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I just said more. I was just like, yeah, async comms and text can really make this bad. Because if you're just like, this code is bad, all lowercase with no other feedback, then over a Slack message, and then you go offline, yeah, that could freak a kid out, you know? And yeah, just kind of trying to reframe the take it personally. And then Tej only responded to the first tweet because Tej doesn't understand threads. And Tej comes in to
You're supposed to reply to the one that you want to reply to, right?
Yeah, actually, TJ understands threads. It turns out you don't understand threads, mister.
Okay.
Hey,
Speaking
I'm
of
not
giving
writing a tweet
feedback,
longer
thank
for
you,
this,
Rockstar,
okay?
For that,
I'm not writing a blog
feedback.
post.
I appreciate that. So my thing was mostly, my question would be, does code review really have to be a difficult conversation? I think we should recognize that as just like part of your job, getting and taking feedback and giving feedback. And so like if someone, unless you work at a really terrible company that you should leave, like getting negative comments on your PRs won't like put you on PIP, like performance improvement plan, or like other stuff like that, right? It'll just be like, oh, cool, there's comments on the PRs, you know? So there's that, which I think is like, I don't know that the book, like thinking about something like difficult conversations, should apply to this situation. There are difficult conversations to have at work, like, hey, you've been underperforming for 6 months and we need you to like kick it into gear or you're going to get fired, or like, hey, you've been a dick to everyone at the company, like shape up and stop doing that. Those are like difficult conversations, but this code sucks shouldn't be a difficult conversation, is sort of like one of the things there. I also have a lot of other thoughts about receiving feedback, but we can talk about that more as we go.
Cool. And then we get to the point where we're all like, we should just stream this because Twitter threads beyond 4 tweets are cringe. And then we all agree. And now it's now.
So
And
cringe.
so there's
And now it's
context. And now it's now. It's been like, I don't know, a week, I think, since that thread. So I wanted to be sure that everybody in chat's now caught up. You now all know where we came from, why this conversation came about. This isn't just like we saw a PR one time and we were like, oh, let's shit on some people. And this was kind of a bit of a back and forth. So yeah, I guess, does anybody have a place that they want to start, or do we want to just start at the bottom of the thread, like kind of going off of what Teej just said?
I feel like there's a really important thing to talk about, and that's the fact that you're not going to be very receptive to feedback, and you will be more sensitive if you're not in a good environment where you already feel valued. I think is a pretty important distinction to make.
Can I go one step actually further behind than that? I actually think the important thing is recognizing that, like, even if someone's a complete jerk to you, they might have valuable feedback that you can use to learn. And it doesn't even matter if they're wrong or mean or bad, or you're in a bad situation, or if the person doesn't communicate anything to you. That's like up to you to decide whether you'll look into what that person has said and decide if you're going to take something valuable out of it, and then be like able to say, I don't care about the rest of what you have to say. And that's like not anything to have to do with coding. That's like every aspect of your life, right? And so for me, like, I was a super junior dev the first time that I was ever contributing to NeoVim. I hadn't even graduated. I'd only been programming for a year. I just started some random PR, and one of my best experiences was this guy named Zix. He doesn't contribute that much anymore. I haven't seen him around, but he's Russian dude, so English isn't his first language. You know what I mean? Like, he was super dry. Everyone called him the robot. He never said anything nice to anybody ever online. And I learned more from him in like one PR than I did from like a whole 2 years working at my first job, because no one gave interesting and useful feedback, right? And so I could have been like, I'm not going to contribute to NeoVim. People are mean to me here. Right? Like, this guy told me my code's bad. This isn't good. But instead, like, recognizing that, okay, he has something valuable for me to learn. It doesn't matter how he presents it. I'm the one that's in control of like how I take feedback. I think is like really important for you being able to grow. And it doesn't matter if you're senior or junior or whatever. Like, if I started out doing woodworking, I would love to have like a woodworking coach who was a jerk and told me every time that I did something stupid. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think there's like even one step back. Now, you can be a more productive team and like a more effective team if what you're saying, Bash, feeling valued, feeling like safe. Those are all things of like a team situation, right? And I 100% agree with what you're saying, but I also think there's some level of just like personal aspect. Like, guys, I get so many mean comments on GitHub issues, right? But like sometimes they're right. And so then I just do the thing that they said and I block the person on Twitter. Like, right? Like, it can just be both. You know what I mean? So anyways, that's my main piece for the first section. I'll stop. I'll allow. I give the floor.
TJ's,
all right, I do want to jump
for
on
taking
that.
harsh feedback. Block them on Twitter. Do what they said
well,
anyway.
Because on Twitter, we talk about things outside of that and the way they present it and things like that, and it can drag you into wanting to have a discussion with them and all stuff. I don't have time for that. I've got kids, I've got a wife, I've got a job, I've got other things. I'm not going to just spend time arguing with an idiot on Twitter. I will if they file a GitHub issue following GitHub template and show a real like crash for Telescope. I will just go and fix that because that's valuable feedback. But I don't need to talk to them on Twitter. They can reach out in GitHub issues.
All right, so I do want to jump on this one because I think it is. My experience with Netflix when I first started, the most valuable feedback I received my entire career up until that point. Know that I am 27 years old, many years of working at a place, and everybody was wherever I worked was this really kind of softer, nicer feedback. And a guy named Jerry Hamlet literally pulled me aside and said, "You committed shit code. I need you to fix this immediately." And he was 100% right. And it was the best feedback I ever received because it made me go, you know what? I need to actually do better. Like, right? Like I wasn't considering these, like not all aspects of the system. I didn't really consider that important. So I'm like, oh, I'm just going to do this thing, fix this thing, took some shortcuts, whatever. And I realized what he was saying is that like he was passionate about what was there. And I could have taken it many ways, right? Everyone knew him as being fairly grumpy, but I just realized that I really wanted to be better at a lot of things. And he gave me a lot of hard feedback. But at the end, he also said some very nice things towards the end. And those were very formative years. And at Netflix, over the course of time, we become a younger company, right? So when I started at Netflix, I was the youngest person in my org at 27. There was not a single person younger than me for quite some time. And then the next youngest person that got hired, both of them ended up getting fired. So I was again the youngest person at Netflix for quite some time. And I still remember those days very, very well because the feedback was fast, it was to the point, and there was just like no stuff, right? It was just like, this is what it is. You need to do that. And I really appreciated that. And then over time, we've become this culture where everyone is using the word nit. Everything, we've devolved into arguing over the simplest things where a regex will get passed with no one even saying anything about it, right? And it becomes this whole culture where people are too afraid to speak up, or they give you what is referred to as a shit sandwich. Hey, you're really, really good. You're all these kind of things. Hey, this is bad. Oh, yeah. You know, it's just like you lose the feedback. You lose the importance of the feedback, the severity of the feedback. It's so geared towards not hurting my feelings that Netflix has become flaccid on feedback. And we were the culture that was like known as the best on feedback. We have books written about it. I would say it is hands down, it is the most plastic feedback culture I've ever seen now.
I want to say
because of that.
I want to add too to like what you're saying, Prime, is that when you have those people in your life who are going to give you like what they actually think, it's so much cooler to get a nice comment from them later. You're like, holy cow, like I did something so good. Senior Mr. Hamlet said it was nice, you know, and you're like,
yeah.
Instead of like, oh, every comment I get is nice. Well, now I don't know. Do people think my code's good? Does my boss actually think I'm doing a good job? Do my peers respect me? I don't know. Everyone just says nice things to me all the time. And I know sometimes I push bad code because I read it next week and it's trash. It looks like Trash Dev wrote it. You know what I mean? Like it's
and then
so
you get a bad
bad.
comment and you crush because everything is good comments. I feel like to me, it just seems like the overcorrection into kindness first is leading people incapable of receiving harder things. Or as one of my favorite people in my life said, expand your comfort zone instead of shrinking your comfort zone.
So I'll jump
Dan,
first.
go.
Hello, it me. Yeah, obviously I'm more on the opposite side of most stuff, so I want to be sure that I let everyone get in all of their takes and Twitter blocks first. I for sure agree, without a doubt, with the premise of like the way feedback is given does not affect how accurate it is. Like, it doesn't matter if you say this code is absolute dog water or like here's exactly my problems and you say it in a nice way. Like, the message can be the same. Like, you can still be saying this code isn't good and this code needs to change. And you're still right. So it's definitely not a question of like, is the reality of what you're saying right or wrong? So like, Teach, 100% I agree with you there. Like, and I would go so far as to say again, I also agree ideally You are a person who can take any sort of feedback and distill it down to what somebody's actually saying versus how they said it. But that is very idealistic when you're noob, because it would be really tough as like a really green engineer to get absolutely reamed out and walking away with a good idea that things are okay and I can fix this and I can improve on this, as opposed to feeling more shut down if you're sitting there with some pretty bad imposter syndrome, right? So as you get up the chain, right, and as you get better at taking feedback, I think it matters less and less how you give it, to the point where, like, you know, Prime could go to his whole team and he could just be like, bad, no, fix, please, Jesus, sweat blobs face. It's like, right? But you give that to a junior engineer, it's not going to be taken the same. And for sure, there's a lot to be said. I agree with you guys that, like, you know, the hardest shit you hear is going to make you grow the most a lot of the time. But it doesn't always go in that direction. I've seen people break. I've seen people go the other way. And I've seen people be much closer to giving up than they were to improving if you said something in the wrong direction. And I had to learn that lesson. Like, this was when I was even in college. And, like, we had an organization where you had to build a project every year and then display it. And I kind of told the kid, I was like, this project probably won't pass. And I didn't take the time to really describe that. And I heard about it later. Kid was full on, like, crying in his room, you know, about it, feeling like shit. He had worked so hard and all he got from me was that, you know? Now, what I said was still true, but because I didn't take any time to actually set it up, or you could even just say I wasn't constructive at a minimum, like I didn't give direction on where to go with it, totally killed that kid for a while, right? And I still harbor a lot of guilt about that. So whether or not it's to be nice, right? Like, I feel like there's a part of giving feedback where you have to say to yourself, is this going to be heard? You know, like, is the way that I'm framing this going to actually be taken by this person in a way that's productive? Or am I coming at this, like, so blunt and aggressively that they might not realize that this is an okay fixable thing and instead just feel like it's just me shitting all over them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And there is a whole spectrum in between that, and that's where you get those comments like, fix this. And again, I still think that tweet was pretty bad. Like, I don't think you need to be telling people to add a comment here or there, but you could be like, this function name is unclear, can we make it something better? Versus like, this is bad, with no other words, you know? And like, that framing, again, it's the same message at the end of the day, but how they take it as a problem that can be solved versus a, like, you have produced garbage and I hate you, which is how a lot of people will take it if they're like sitting there with a ton of imposter syndrome and a ton of fear given their first couple PRs in a company. There's a lot of distance there.
I do have something. Okay, so one, I'd be very curious. Okay, would you think, because I'm also I'm also in like a junior level position right now, but I also have a pretty blunt personality, in the sense that I've always responded well to like teachers that are just very direct and pretty harsh. Those are the ones that I'm like, okay, like, you give a shit, I'll put some effort in here, versus people that I felt they were always trying to coddle me. I was like, I'll never reach my full potential with this person filtering what they're saying. So like, I've always been like that, even as like a small child. I was like mini Jocko Willink, you know, just like, tell me like it is, Navy SEAL style. No, but for real. Question, would it come across as too direct if your senior was going through your code and they basically were writing bullet points of like what needs to change? If they just sent you that bulleted list, would that feel like, would that be something that might be, I guess, too direct? Because I feel like that would, to me, that wouldn't be too direct for me, because I'd be like, okay, here are just like tasks of things for me to change. You know what I mean? If it was like, rename this, change spacing here, whatever, remove these comments. I personally respond well with like very specific feedback, especially when I'm new to whatever the program is. Like, I want to make sure that I'm meeting the standard for their code, and then I'm not questioning my work as much.
Yeah. Like, I think towards what, like, you know, Prime joked about like the shit sandwich. and it is super a meme. But putting like 2 nice sentences ahead of 20 bullet points of like, hey, this is a good start. Got a few fixes that'll make this good enough
What
to
if
go into
it's not a
production.
good start?
That's a good question.
It's something.
Don't
It probably
lie
runs.
to your juniors.
Yeah.
Don't
I mean,
lie
I was
to them.
assuming it was, but if it's not, you could even say
It's
like,
usually not. Otherwise, they'd be seniors.
Teach said, "You're all bad. You're all bad.
No,
I'm gonna throw out all your code."
I'm still bad sometimes, and I have lots of people that I respect at work that I want them to not start with something inane, nice try. No, just tell me what to fix and get good. And that's my point, like generally speaking. So I'm just saying, but like the first part of saying, don't tell them, you agree, don't tell them good start if it's not a good start, right?
For sure. Yeah, no, don't lie to them.
Okay.
Right?
Cool.
But you have to make sure
Then-
that you frame it and like clearly give a 1 to 2 sentence redirect away so they can't, like, they don't take it as personally, right? Because if you're like, fix all of this, bullet point list with like nothing, right? They don't have a lot of direction about how to feel about that list and how to take it. And again, if they're new, like, assume all new people will take everything the wrong way because like they're not confident, right? They're scared. They're afraid that they're bad. But you add 1 or 2 sentences of reframing, like even if the code's absolute dog water, like you could say like, hey, we're gonna have to rewrite this, like, you know, and you can like redirect, like there's a lot of little tricks you can do. Like you can redirect some blame where you could say like, I might not have been clear enough about like how to do this. Like, let's hop on a call and let me take you through like how I want to see this done, you know, to make it more clear or something like that, right? Like you have to throw them at least one bone, because the problem is if you give them zero direction of how to feel, like as dumb as it sounds, you have to tell them how to feel about stuff, especially when it's async, especially when it's text. Like this is why emojis exist, because a text message can be really, really, really misinterpreted as like you screaming at them, like, this is terrible, fix it, you know, like you can make a guy feel real bad. But again, you can get the same message across with just being sure to say like, you're not a bad programmer, but we do need to fix this, is literally like what you want to say. And I swear to God, Teach, if you say, but what if they are a bad programmer?
Yeah,
So-
well, yes,
yeah.
recognize you're a bad programmer. That's good to recognize. That's helpful to know. That's how you get good. If I'm playing basketball and I'm not Steph Curry, like Steph Curry doesn't have to tell me nice try, dude. He's like, you're a garbage basketball player. Like he can say it like that, and that should be like there are facts about how it's doing. So like that's the part that I just feel like, one,
Did you play
giving
sports?
feedback on a PR is not the same thing as your company culture. My company culture, I would set up expectations. Now, like I tell my juniors, hey, I love you. You're my coworker. We're in this together. We're going to make this company good. We're going to like beat all the big people. We're going to crush at this startup and we're going to win. And we're going to IPO and you're going to retire. And that's what we're going to do. To do that goal, I'm going to leave you direct feedback on PRs. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm not going to tell you nice work on this when it's bad. I'm going to leave you things that you can do to get better, right? So it's like, my thought is like your PR feedback, where you leave PR comments, where you tell them what to do. I don't need that to be my only interaction with people. Like, and sometimes it is though, because that's life and like async comms. I just feel like, I don't know. I like, part of it is how you can give feedback, but also like my advice for people, part of the reason that I wanted to do this is to tell people you get to choose how you take the feedback. That's up to you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like, maybe you're a junior, maybe you need to hear us talk about this and say, you choose that you're going to be the person who receives feedback well. And it doesn't mean you're a bad person, but you might be a bad programmer. Yeah. Like that's true.
My wife came in here. She actually wanted to jump in on this conversation. She's been listening. And
Oh,
really?
she said,
Get her in.
Oh my God,
She doesn't want to be on camera.
God.
But that's
Give
why I went
her
dark
the
for a
headset,
second.
Mike.
Give
No,
one
no,
the
no,
headset right
degenerates
now.
are here.
Do it.
No, she's long gone. But what she said something along the lines of this, which is that one important aspect that we're missing is, though, and I do agree with her on this one, is that when someone does do a good job outside of these PR things, right, like accomplishing tasks, delivering real features and all that, that's when you should lean in for the more positive, the affirmation thing, like, hey, what you did there was really important. We're really happy you did that. You did a great job, right? Like that is a place to be built up. And I do think that that leads to significantly less imposter syndrome, is real accomplishments getting real recognition, as opposed to these false starts. Oh, you did a really good job. Could you just take the turds out? That's all I want, right? Like, it's just like, that's not a good, like, to me, that just reinforces these problems, which is you don't give real good feedback and you don't give real bad feedback. Instead, you just always give this middle of the line, unoffensive, unhurtful comments, and no one's going to learn from that, right?
Yeah.
I don't think you get built up better. I think you only exaggerate a problem, which is imposter syndrome, which is this continued belief that you might not be good enough.
That's the part too where, oh, go ahead, Bash. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, I think that really ties into having like a positive work environment. Like, you need to feel really supported by your team, and like that you are in a position where you could, if you mess something up, but like own up to it to your boss, like to the point where you can, or like if you're feeling like overwhelmed, that you can talk to your boss about it and you can have that transparency in your workplace. I think like you have to be kind of at that level to, especially as a junior, to be able to be taking like pretty harsh feedback, I think. And to further kind of TJ's point where, like, what if it's bad? What if it's not a good start? And what if the whole thing is bad? I feel like at that point, the best response from the senior dev would be to say, hey, I saw your PR. Can we schedule a time to maybe do some pairing on it? And then that allows it to, like, when things are getting fixed, even though it's like, they're just hopping in the backpack a little bit of the senior. Well, that's like, they're still going to feel like they had a hand in fixing it. And they're going to be able to ask questions while the senior is like, helping them tailor the code so that it's actually reaching the code quality that is expected. Because I think that the biggest question that I think fosters a lot of self-doubt for juniors is like, I don't know what the code quality should look like. I see the code, I have access to the whole code base, but like when you're new, it's like, I need an example. Like, give me like, explain like I'm 5 example of how I can improve my code. So I do think like I personally have found that like the pairing sessions when I'm pretty lost on something, or if I'm like, if you're just feeling lost about like where, like, about your direction with any of your code, it's like the pairing is really helpful.
Yeah, I do agree. Pairing is definitely a really good thing, and that is one of the best ways to get better at something. And yeah, when a PR is that bad, I don't see why you wouldn't, as a senior, just say, hey, we're just going to have to redo this, but let me show you why I would do it this way versus that way.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that's not mean. That's good feedback,
helpful.
Right? Like, that's helpful.
That's good.
Yeah, I agree. It also helps build like camaraderie between you and the junior, so that when you continue to give direct feedback, like, it has a context for that, right?
That's the thing, man. Yeah. That's the thing that I think that you said earlier, where you were like, I'm going to give really harsh feedback, but you also, in that hypothetical scenario, gave them a speech ahead of time, right? And you were like, hey, like, it's you, me, this company against the world. Let's go kick some ass. I'm going to be super straightforward with you, but not because I hate you. I'm going to be super straightforward with you because, like, we got to move fast, right? And even just that preface, a lot of people don't get that much. But that's, like, the psychological safety, right? That's, like, this is the workplace. This is how it is, but it's not about me. It's about the work. And that's the framing that you need, right? And if you don't have that framing, then it can come off really bad, right? Even in your scenario, you still felt like you had to give that little preface, because otherwise, like, if you just gave like zero context, just straight blunt feedback, right, it's going to be tough. But like, if you have a decent relationship with them, if you start to help them feel a little bit comfortable with you, then blunt feedback is different, because it depends on who's saying it. Like, you won't hear a message the same from your brother as some stranger, and it's the same way with people at work. Like, getting that rapport, or even just that preface of like letting them know, hey, this feedback's going to be super blunt, and like, that's okay. Like, that's just how we do things here, because it's going to make you better faster, and I want you to succeed. Like, those 3 sentences one time will go extremely far.
Yeah, I will say though, I don't think that you need that. Once again, I just want to reiterate, it's up to you to decide how you're going to do that. And it's true, some juniors don't have the experience to decide to do that, but some juniors still do anyways. And like, some people do that. And I'm not saying I'm the perfect dev. I'm just saying, when I did my first PR for NeoVim, that's what happened. And there was no coddling talk. There was no, TJ, you're really smart and like, nice try here. It was just like, here's what you need to fix to get this PR accepted. They don't know who I am. I'm just a random person on the internet submitting a PR to a large open source project. There's no possible way that what they can do is take the time to set context and do all this. No, like they just were like, you need to fix these things, write tests. I didn't even know what tests were. I had to go look. No one held my hand. You know what I mean? Like I was a literal idiot. I was a coding idiot. You know what I mean? Like I didn't know anything. I didn't know how to do Git. Like I like messed up my branch, all this other stuff. And they're like, yeah, you need to rebase this. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. And they're like, I was like, but I just went and figured, you know what I'm saying? But like, I'm saying you get to choose if you want to do that. Right. And then so I just think there's a difference between, and that's the reason that I wanted to talk about it partially, is like what you can do as a person receiving the feedback versus what makes a really productive team. I don't think the original tweet, and I think we all agree, the original tweet is garbage team, because you're like basically saying like, instead of just saying, I don't understand why you would write this code like this, it's not good. Like basically, instead you're like, you ask this passive aggressive question like, oh, I'm not sure if it should be written this way. And you're like, what, am I never going to be able to know what you feel? Like instead you're just going to hide behind nice words, and I'm constantly anxious that I could be doing a bad job. No, if you tell me when I'm doing a bad job and tell me when I'm doing a good job, then I know. You know what I mean? Then I know. And this isn't just for work. Like I think this is really useful advice for like long-term relationships. Like with my wife, we have agreed, like we'll just tell each other. I
tell her code's terrible every day.
Every time she sits down at VS Code and like tries to write TypeScript, I'm like, stop, learn a real language. But like we tell each other, like when I tell you that I liked this thing, like that you did, or the way that you like made dinner or something, like whatever it is, you know, that means I liked it. And you can count on that every time, no matter what. And if I say that this was a thing that I didn't like, then you'll know. And like that pretty much never happens because she's really awesome and way cooler than I am. But like, so I think that's like the kind of scenario that I think builds a really healthy and good situation. And a lot of it is just up to like individuals to take the feedback well.
I do like that this is really a two-sided conversation, which is what's your responsibility to the team and what is the team's responsibility to you. Your responsibility truly is to take feedback better. Right? You cannot hear if you're not willing to. And I do think the team's job is to create an environment in which honesty is valued, right? That a person understands that you are saying that. Because I think TJ's so right on that. I could never figure out why I didn't like it. I knew that something was wrong, but TJ, when you said that the fact that people are saying these things in such a passive or nice way, it really is just a continuous spin of distrust. Right? You never know actually how a person really feels, but knowing how a person really feels can clear a lot of roadblocks. Because when they do react happily, you know for a fact that this is a good thing. And when they react poorly, you know, like, hey, this isn't good, you know it's a bad thing. Like that's a really positive thing for a team is honesty. Now, I do get that you should know your audience, blah, 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 blah. I've never interacted with the person. I know they're new for the first time this week. My feedback will look a lot different than if I've interacted with this person once before, and they should be up to speed with the team dynamics. Like I do understand these nuances, but that also does not excuse hearing a PR or hearing feedback just in general, regardless of if it's in PR format or not.
I think sometimes it's like it's kind of like ripping the Band-Aid off. Is like, yeah, it might sting a little when you first hear it. But ultimately, like you get to, you still get to grow from that. But like, yeah, the initial sting might happen. It's just kind of part of our nature. I think another thing too is, so Rox, I'd be really curious. I feel like a lot of what you've been saying has been oriented around teams, right? Because like, obviously if you're working in a team, they're the ones that are going to be able to provide you the context with like, hey, we appreciate you. And like, don't take this personally and stuff like that. But if you were to contribute to an open source project where they don't know you, they just like, all they know is this code that you wrote and the PR that you created, and you want to merge some code into their code base. Do you find that you respond differently to that kind of feedback versus feedback at work when you're working in a team?
Yeah, I was going to say, when Teach started saying that, like, definitely everything I've said has been in the context of like you are in a team with a manager. Like there is a rapport that should be set because like you're a handful of people who are going to be working together, which is very, very different from open source. I'll be honest that I haven't thought about this with open source. I think I'm probably more towards where you guys are with open source because I mean it's just at a scale and a level where like Prisma has 2.2k open issues right now. Like there's probably no time. The most I would ever expect anybody in open source to do would be to start a message with, "Hey, thanks for submitting a fix," and then crap all over the code. And like that's fine, right? That would be enough just to like kind of station it and give like at least again like a quarter sentence of direction of like, because we're not mad at you for submitting code, especially in open source, right? You don't owe it to anybody.
Get destroyed.
But, yeah, I don't know much about open source, so I can't comment on that as much. But I feel like just initial thoughts is probably closer to teach, but like throw in a thanks and you're fine, because like appreciate people contributing, and that feels fair.
Yeah, and I think like it's good if you really like something in the PR or you really like what happened to say that it's good, right? Like I think my point is that my point is not that you don't give positive feedback. No, give positive feedback. My point is like be honest and be direct. And the other thing is like you don't attack a person. Like even if I thought the person was a terrible developer, I still wouldn't say that. I would never say that. I would never say you're a bad person and a bad developer. I would definitely never say you're a bad person for writing bad code. Who cares? Like being a good person has nothing to do with being able to write code good. You know what I mean? So like I would never say that person is like I would never say you're a bad developer. You know what I mean? I might say this code is like really inefficient, or this code, like I would say why it's bad in some way, or also that it just needs to be completely restarted. You know what I mean? Like, which is sometimes what I think needs to be said. And especially like depending on the kind of team you're working on, how often you're like able to be synchronous, how much time your senior devs have. Like your senior devs cost the company a lot of money. And so if they have to like constantly baby and handhold you, that's costing your company so much money. Like at some point it'd just be like, why would they be hired there? You know what I mean? Like, and so you have to be careful about those things, that there's more to like working in a company than just me. Like I don't really expect people to change for me. That's like, that feels super selfish to me. Because then I'm basically expecting this, like, I'm basically saying the world revolves around me, and like, I want it to be that way, you know?
I want to follow it up with a question, Rox. I do want to hear your answer on this one. I posted in the chat, but should the individual bend towards the team, or should the team bend towards the individual? Because based on kind of how we're going with this conversation, it does appear that this is a lopsided conversation in the sense that TJ, Bash, and I probably have it so that the individual bends towards the team, right? Whereas from your perspective, it seems like the team should bend towards the individual. Okay, Bash is on the fence both ways.
Let Rox answer first.
Yeah, I guess like the word bends feels like a much larger scale view than what I'm kind of getting towards, which is more of like, right, like overall picture, goal of company, goal of team, get the most done, be the most successful, right? And like there's the side of the coin that is straightforward feedback should result in you being more successful, right? Like you will know more. That's kind of what you guys are saying, right? Like if I don't know how you're feeling, if I don't get straight from you what you're feeling, I'm not going to improve as much, right? I would say that's pretty true, right? But there's the other side of the coin, which is psychological safety. If I make the people on my team not feel safe, not feel comfortable, and they feel like shit, they're not going to do as well, right? They're not going to produce as good code. Like trial by fire is a great premise, but not everybody walks out of it, you know? And so if I'm aiming for success, like I play both sides of the coin just enough, right? Like again, I'll come back to like Tej's thing from earlier where it's like throw in the intro message, right? Just set the stage for them. That's probably enough, right? That's like as much as the team needs to bend to the individual is to say, welcome to the team. Here's how things work here, right? And just as long as you give them that much, right, then it's okay to just, standard operating procedure from there. But, I think if you're not welcoming initially, end of the day, a stranger just joined your family. you know, in a really like aggressive way. I shouldn't say the word family. It's going to trigger a lot of people. A stranger just joined
Yeah, my work is
you know,
family. But yeah.
like you gotta a stranger
My
just joined
job
you.
is
Like,
not a family.
Prime's like, I hate every person at Netflix, especially my boss, whose name is hit the bleep button. I don't have one of those.
Fine.
There you
There
go.
you go.
All right, someone lip read that. Someone lip read that. Clip it. Zoom in. But you know, like you gotta like, there's gotta be some. There doesn't have to be. I shouldn't say that. But I think that for everybody to be the most successful, right? Part of bringing up a newbie is to help teach them that this is how things work and like this is how to take feedback, and not bring them in on day one and say do it, but bring them in on day one and say here's how it works. We're going to start doing that. And like it's okay, like Prime said, right? Like my first PR review to somebody might not look like my third or fourth, you know? Like you don't have to totally rip the band-aid off. It's okay to take one or two and be a little bit slower about it, or be a little bit kinder, just again to give them that psychological safety. And again, this is not about open source, this is about team. But like that's why I don't like the word bend, right? Because it's like I think you need to give somebody as much as it's going to take them to succeed. And I think if you start them at 0 straight to PR review, you're not giving them enough to succeed because you haven't made them feel safe yet. And once you feel safe, once you feel comfortable, like you can take all of that feedback and really, really run with it and do super great things. Literally day one, my boss said almost exactly what Teach just said at my new gig. He was like, I'm going to give you super blunt feedback. That's just how we do things here because we just want to move fast. And I was like, cool, got it. I won't take it personally, you know? But if he hadn't said that, right, I wouldn't know if that's how things are or if he's just doing that to me, right? I wouldn't know if that's like I'm actually worse and I'm getting a lot harsher critique and then like I'm going to freak out because like Teach said, I'm not going to tell you you're a bad programmer, but without that safety, there's a good chance you just make them feel that way anyway, right? You just hit that identity button for them anyway, which maybe they are, but again, improvement doesn't mean you need to feel like you are in the general sense bad. You could just say, this code is bad, right? We need to improve this. And they can become a better programmer through the focus on the work, as opposed to, again, anything that might redirect to themselves. So again, this is like all really small scale. I'm talking a few messages. I'm talking like be a little nicer in the first or second PR. And after that, you're fine. But I see a lot of people who don't. You know, I hear a lot of times where that like welcome party isn't there. And then people don't get to feel safe. And then people are gone. Because they were like, yeah, my team was full of people who didn't like me. You know, you don't want to give people that impression because then it means that they're not going to take the feedback as well. And like, it's still on them to take it well, but I think it's on you to make them feel welcome first. And then after that, it's on them, you know, like it's on them to kind of be welcomed and like, you know, start running like standard operating procedure. But there's a middle ground.
And some people are jerks and you shouldn't work with them. Like
That's
agreed on, like, you know, like agreed. People have bad culture sometimes that aren't about helping you get better by giving constructive and direct feedback. Some people are jerks who want to crush you and feel like a power trip at work. Yeah, don't work with them if possible. Like obviously not everyone has the ability to just switch jobs whenever they feel like it because they have bad work environment or something like that. But like, yes, some people are jerks about it and do it not to help you. And so don't don't do that, and you should leave or get them fired or something, or like tell them, you know.
But let's also focus on the flip side of that, which is if that happens to you at multiple jobs, you need to ask yourself, am I the one perceiving everyone to be a jerk?
Yeah.
Right? There's definitely two sides to everything, which is all I do think it should be emphasized. I mean, we're arguing about like 3 technical different topics. One is team building, right? Safety and all these things. That's really like a team building exercise. Feedback and receiving feedback. That's like 2 sides of the, you know, of an argument here. But extending charity towards somebody else is an extremely important part of hearing from anybody. If you're not willing to hear them, it doesn't matter, right? Like if you've already made up your mind about how like if someone comes in and let's say that, I work with some Russian people and they do communicate in a much more blunt fashion. Now, my first couple interactions, I thought, this guy's kind of a jerk. But when he gave me stuff on a PR, I could have brought that baggage in. That was my choice to choose to listen or to not listen to my experiences with him. And I chose not to. And he actually had really good feedback. And you could tell that his ultimate goal was to make the best software. And I accepted it. I started to accept his feedback and go, okay, yeah, I get this. And that's later when I realized it was just the Russian in him that made it a little bit more blunt than anything else. It's just a language barrier, really.
I'm so glad that we all know at least one Russian code guy and have had that experience.
It's universal.
So I have a couple things now. To piggyback off of what Prime just said, even in my tweet, I chose these words intentionally. You might choose to take it personally. While you will always have this like knee-jerk reaction of like emotion, I think that when you're in any given situation, whether you're the person giving feedback or receiving feedback, there's only one side of it that you can control. And there's only like you can control how you choose to respond to that or react to that and like move forward. Or you can choose how you are going to give feedback, but you can't really decide, like you don't really get to decide how the other person's going to take it or how the other person's going to give you feedback. You can talk to them, like it is within your control for you to talk to them and say, hey, I would appreciate if the feedback was a little bit more, like if you gave more information when you give me feedback, because right now I'm not really I don't feel like I'm able to apply it directly to my code or something like that. I think it's important to set boundaries and be very clear in your communication of like how they should communicate with you best. That's within your right, that's within your control. But ultimately, if somebody chooses not to do that, or if that's not their default reaction, like you can't control what they're going to say or how they're going to say it, but you can control how you're going to receive it and what you're going to do with that information. So that's one off of what Prime just said. Two, with the individual bending to the team or the team bending to the individual, I think that I agree with Rox on this. So I think that during the onboarding process, during that first like couple weeks to a month of the person getting used to the team and the code base and the business and all of that stuff, that I think it's actually the team kind of bending a bit more to the individual, because at that stage it's like they need to be more available for that person. They need to like there is like a shift in the team where they all need to now invest more energy into this person's being onboarded to make sure that it's a smooth process. But I think after that point, it ends up being, of course, the individual is, I think it's kind of meeting in the middle, I guess, during onboarding. It's like the individual is trying to adapt and the team needs to help them adapt. So it's kind of meeting in the middle, and then eventually the team or the individual bending more towards the team, as in like, picking up whatever it is, like whatever the expectations are, like making sure the commit messages are consistent, making sure the code quality is consistent, making sure that you're keeping the code consistent overall. So that's what I have to say.
Totally agree. And like, I think part of the difficulty too with this conversation is like I'm replying a lot to the original tweet, right? Which the original tweet was like, don't tell them that this is bad and to do something else. And like, you want to do that in the situation Bash is talking about. You know what I mean? Like you want to know like what the expectation is for your company, that like, and set that standard correctly. That's helpful to know as a junior. That helps you not feel lost in a sea of infinite possibilities of code to write. Instead, you say, oh, actually, this isn't good. Like we wrote a library for this already, import it. Like, it doesn't have to be like different than that. Like, was it intentional that this was repeated twice? You're like, what? Like, why are you asking me passive aggressive questions in my PR? I just want to know what you actually think. And so we can have expectations that are shared with each other.
Yeah. I think it's super okay for like a senior engineer to say like, especially in that scenario, right? Like, we have a library for this. Like, you use the library. Like, I think it's super okay for seniors to give like pretty clear direction, because that's really what juniors need. I mean, half of the stuff in chat people have been saying is like the worst thing ever is when you tell a junior it's bad and don't tell them what to do about it, and don't give them a direction. Like that's worthless to them, right?
Toxic.
Yeah, exactly.
Not worthless. We'll say it is good to know that something's wrong. That is at least one piece of valuable information, assuming that the person telling you that it's bad is right. So it's not worthless. It may be that you don't know what to do next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's more worthless is telling them that it's good. No, what's worse is telling them that it's good, looks good to me, ship it, and then not ever letting them know. That is actually worse than telling them that it's bad.
My
Yeah.
worst feedback I ever received was when someone said, "Hey, it looks pretty good," and later on I found out that they told somebody else that they thought it was crap. Right? Like that was by far the worst experience I've ever had, and to this day it still bothers me. That was 10
But I just
years
want
ago.
to like I agree that there is a much better ceiling for how good your feedback could be than this is bad, right? But like that is not worthless, and that's one of the things that like I'm trying to communicate maybe like a little more forcefully like than I would in my day-to-day life and how I treat like someone who I work with. Like I generally find that I'm a pretty like amicable person at work, and like if you see me on stream and things, like I think people like working with me. That's been consistent feedback that I get. But like if it's bad, don't tell them that it's good. That is the least helpful thing you can do to a junior.
For sure. I'm just imagining like they merge the PR and it's like LGTM merge, and then they go in, comment on the closed PR, JK, and that's it.
Well, or like they just go and do it themselves. Like that would be way worse, way more toxic, as you tell your juniors it's fine, and then the senior just like goes behind their back and merges something the next day, like without doing it, because like that is way worse. Or like than just saying like looks good to me and then keep going.
Big agree. Yeah, I think it was oh god, oh no, I lost my train of thought. Okay, never mind.
That's okay. I have one clarification to make too from someone who said in chat earlier. I don't think you should feel bad as a person if you're a bad dev. That was not the impression that I meant to do. I was saying it is helpful for you to recognize that if you are a bad dev, that you are a bad dev. That is like a helpful thing to know. And then if you know that there are some things that you do well as a dev, then knowing that you're doing those things well, that doesn't have any bearing on you as a person. You're still equally valuable as every other person. And I love all of you.
Michael Jordan was not a good basketball player to begin with.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. So I'm curious. So I, in my life, have gone through where I was basically like the worst in the class to being the best in the class. And I think that is part of the reason that I am now okay with such direct feedback, because that's what brought me from being the worst. Because I was like, okay, I'm bad, but like, who cares? I have fun with it, and I want to get better because it's fun and I like it. And so like, even now, like, even if it doesn't matter to me if I'm the worst on the team. If anything, that's a good learning opportunity, because now I'm better. Like everybody else is better than me at coding, right? And that means that I have so many resources that I can use to improve and to get feedback and like check out their code. What are they doing well? See what they're doing and start to try and mimic that, start to try and bring that on and asking for feedback. And I don't associate that like being the worst as like part of my identity, because it's like, okay, well, I'm the worst for now, but I like it and I want to be consistent with it. And as long as I keep trying and putting effort in, I will get better. And I'm curious to hear for those, or like, out of like if people have like gone through a similar experience where like, being the worst and then like getting a lot better. If that maybe has changed how you're able to take feedback.
Rockstar,
Prime, you were nodding like you were gonna. Yeah.
No, I was just waiting for Rockstar to say he was still the worst, and he hasn't made that transition yet.
Oh, nice. I was actually gonna say in the actually the exact opposite, and in a pure moment of like earnest candor, I didn't have that problem. I grew up smart, and I was top of the class from kind of day one for pretty much my whole life. And a lot of privilege went into that, right? Like this is me trying to flex. Like I'm very, very, very lucky to have grown up that way and in that scenario and that environment. But for sure, in some ways, like it made me weak. It made me not able to take things. And like a lot of people like to make fun of a guy like me because they're like, oh, look at this, little coddled kid. But I earned my points, right? Like I did well on my tests, I did well on my stuff, but then I did get to Facebook and I was super overwhelmed, like, and I didn't get great feedback. Like
you didn't know how to be bad.
I don't know how to be bad, right? And that's the thing. Like a lot of people, especially coming out of school, might not know how to be bad, right? You don't know
Mhm.
how somebody else has been brought up or raised, right? Like, Bash, your story, right? Prime, I don't know, maybe even Tej, you relate to that. Like, if you came up in that kind of environment, then great, you're on it from day one. But you don't know that person yet. You could have a me on your team, right? And a me on your team is going to be pretty scared on day one if I get completely shit on, you know? And I can learn,
Mhm.
right? But there's a whole emotional journey I have to go on to become a person who knows how to take harsh feedback. And like, I totally
Yeah.
agree with you, Bash. Like, it is a personal thing, and it is like a decision. But I would put it more, less of a decision, more of like, it's almost like a personality trait that you have to
It's a
develop.
habit,
Like, it's a habit. It's
I
it's a
think.
learned behavior, right? And you don't
Yeah.
know that somebody's learned that yet. And so if you assume that they do, and you're like, well, this is how the world works, like, take it or leave it, figure it out right now, you're giving them less of a chance to succeed. And that's why I make, like I say, those like first couple things are so important. Because like, again, if you're aiming for the best success of the team, right? You want to make sure that whoever's coming in, regardless of what has happened in their past, is going to be ready for what they're about to face, you know? And like, you're just going to give them that little bit of prep, give them that little extra hand. You don't have to be super nice, but, you know, frame it, because they're not used to that,
Mhm.
right? Like, I wasn't in that world. I haven't been super shit all over my whole life and had to like grind to improve. I had it easy. Lucky
Mhm.
me, right up until I walk into the hard job, and then not so lucky me.
It's
Oh,
everyone gets hit differently, right? And like at different stages in life. And it's kind of like if these things didn't happen earlier in your life, like as a kid or teenager or whatever, then it's like eventually you're gonna be in some situation where like you learn that lesson. So it's like, yeah, I I totally agree with you, Rox. And also the fact that like having grown up with being, yeah, like really like naturally gifted and like being able to be like top of the class and stuff like that without necessarily always having to try very hard to do that. Like you probably got a lot of praise as a kid and a lot of praise as a teenager of being like, wow, you're so smart. Wow, you're so good at this. And like important part of your identity because that's what people would acknowledge of you, you know? And so now when you're put in a situation where um maybe you're not the smartest person in the room or you're being put in a position where you're like, I don't know anything of what's going on. Like it would be super uncomfortable because you're just like, shit, this is like my identity. This is what people praise me for. Like one of the things that people praised me for when I was young, like it becomes, I feel like it's also it's like shocking how much what you're raised with and what people point out as like a compliment for you when you're growing up ends up influencing your identity so much, you know? So I just say that.
Yeah. You don't know someone's story, you know? You don't know how they're going to react
Yeah.
coming in. So,
Yeah.
I will say that like it's also possible that they have the opposite reaction, right? Like I think you should be kind and compassionate. I'm not saying that, but like also maybe someone has had a bunch of experiences with people giving them crap sandwiches and nice, mean, bad, and or nice, mean, nice. And those people are manipulatively abusing those people by doing that and like trying. So like I don't think that just saying like some people like aren't ready for this or that like makes it so that we always have to pick one way, right? Like if the way is always then crap sandwich, well, some people have had bad experiences with that, right? And so you can't, because you can't know, you can pick things that you think are effective and try and create like we've talked about before. And like I want to make super clear, your team will be way more effective if they feel safe in a way
Mhm.
that means that like everyone can work together. And like my idea of a safe environment might be different than other people's. That's also okay. But like um that psychological safety should give you the ability then to give direct feedback. So in the original tweet about not giving direct feedback and instead being passive aggressive questions, that doesn't create psychological safety in the long run, even if it feels like it does in the first week, you know? And so that's like the part of the culture that I feel like is important for us to discuss, because you can end up in this situation then where like people continue their imposter syndrome forever at their job because no one ever tells them when they do anything wrong. And so you're like walking on eggshells all the time, which is like, that's worse for the person. Like I want them to know that I like working with them and their code's dope and that they can trust me when I say that.
Mhm.
And that is true. I do abuse trash on Twitter.
I think that's a good point, which is that there is no cookie cutter solution to this. The best possible solution is to get to know somebody, right? Regardless of PRs and all this stuff and every single way you take it, if you don't get to know the person that's on your team, obviously open source is different. You can't really get to know somebody on Twitter. Just don't even get involved in an argument at all because it's always stupid. But in like on a team, you have the chance to get to know somebody, right? You have it's really your obligation as a member of the teammate. Like that's your team bending towards the individual is to make them feel like they should come along, right? And so that's as simple as just like, especially like at Netflix, we always have like a common lunch areas. Just be like, yo, let's grab lunch, right? Has nothing to do with the PR, but that's going to give me the ability to be as direct as possible in PR, right? So to me, individual stuff is way cooler. And the rest of this stuff is just all, incidental to that. People trying to fix a symptom instead of fixing the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't use the word knit. I don't use any of those things. I just say what it is. That's it. And I would rather go grab drinks with you than argue if private with an underscore is more safe in TypeScript than ECMAScript private without the underscore. I don't care.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's like kind of the summation, right? Is like, it's not about what's in the PR. It's about what happens outside of the PR to make you feel okay about the PR.
Yeah.
It's the conversation, it's the lunch, it's a little bit of friendship, right? Like that psychological safety, right? You make somebody feel comfortable and safe as a person on the team and not that they're anything but. And then you can be super blunt because you set the stage, right? They feel comfortable. They're like, oh, this is coming from Prime. Like, Prime's dope, Prime's nice. Like, I know that he can say these things. It's not coming from a place of like anger, hate, insert a million bad imposter syndrome vibes.
Yeah. It's similar to like friendships of like, you don't poke fun at somebody you don't know and expect them to take it well. Whereas like, if you know the person and you like, they know you and they know that you're just kidding around or like you have good intentions or whatever. It's like, there's more room there, but yeah.
I do. I don't actually like the term psychological safety in the sense that it means a lot of things to a lot of people. Whereas like I want someone to feel community, right? I want them to feel what it's like to be a part of the in crowd, right? Because you'll never ever, that implies safety, but it implies a lot of other things as well, right? Because it's just a hard term for me to kind of reconcile. What exactly does that mean, right? Does that mean you feel safe at your job? You can be not safe at your job, meaning you are underperforming, meaning you are on the chopping block and you've been told there's no psychological safety at that moment, but you can still feel an environment of welcoming and community and all those kind of things. So I don't like that word because it is too one-dimensional. I want something different, right? I want something that I don't know how to describe it other than community, right? They have to feel part of the in crowd.
I feel like trust is one of the words. Like, you can trust that people are being honest,
Yeah. I feel like psychological safety would be something that you establish for yourself using your benefits, going to free therapy so that you can figure out what your triggers might be and or figure out if you are feeling unsafe at work or something like that, like how you can take that more under your wing of like, how can I change how I'm feeling at work, even if it's a toxic environment that I have to stay in for a little while. I think it's still up to you of like, you're the only one who's going to make you feel safe or unsafe. You could be in this, you could be in like one of those like padded cells, for like that would technically, that's a safe room. You cannot hurt yourself. You cannot, but like if you're an anxious person, like you will spiral because you're like, I'm locked in this room and now I'm worrying about things and whatever. But I think that, so I think that ultimately, like when it comes down to how you're feeling in the team can, make you feel part of the team, but ultimately like how you're feeling as an individual at work is like also up to you.
Yeah, that's where like when Prime is saying like about having, especially I think remote, someone asked about remote, and like I have a lot of experience working remote and like working in open source and stuff like that, and like having charity about how you read what someone's comment is, and like what you do is you try and like, so this isn't like once again, this is like a thing I'm recommending to each of you out there in the audience to do to better yourself and your career, It's not a solution necessarily that like lets you be a jerk to people. Those are two separate things, right? But like when you read someone's comment, you can choose to read that in the best light possible and assume the best intentions about someone, especially like a coworker. And then you can just like accept that and then try and do what you think the result of like those best intentions are, right? So like you can assume, oh, the reason they're communicating to me like this is because they want the code to be good, not because they hate me, right? And that's like a learned skill. It takes practice, it takes effort, it takes maturity, it takes a bunch of things. It's not just like I'm going to wake up today and decide that that works for me. That's not how it works. But like that's what I'm saying is like my advice, like for people reading these things, especially remote work, especially in contexts where you don't know the other people or whatever, have charity and then like just do your best based on those things until someone breaks that trust and it's clear that they're a jerk and they can't be trusted and you need to get out of this team and switch to somewhere else, if at all possible.
Yeah.
Right. That's how I think for remote work it's really helpful.
I do want to run with that for a quick second. If someone does do that, bring it up to them, right? If they hear you, you can talk about it, you can resolve it, and trust, 10 times better trust will be established than before. You can really trust them. Or B, you should bring it up to your manager when that doesn't work, right? Bring the receipts. Be like, I tried. I reached out. I tried to figure stuff out. It will not work. What do I do? Because you may not be the only person feeling that way. If everyone is quiet about it, you just have a team that destroys themselves because no one's willing to speak up and no one's willing to meet somebody halfway or secondly go to their boss. And then you have teams that are being destroyed because of one person, which really that one person should be let go. Like that's really the truer solution to the whole thing.
And sometimes those people don't even know. They don't know how their text is coming across. Like they're just writing out stuff and they don't recognize that like, oh man, like I didn't know I was being a jerk to you. Like my bad, it happens. It really does like happen. Some people will deny it and blah, blah, and all this other stuff. But like if I found out that the way I was treating someone made them feel like belittled at work, then I would be like, oh, I would like to change that. Like, so that you don't feel that way, assuming that, their complaints are like remotely valid at all. Like I want people to be happy to work with me. Like I don't want to be a jerk to them. So, but how can you ever know if you never tell them, right? That's like, that's that thing. That's that two-way feedback. That's that honesty and trust that I think like you want to cultivate and show is possible to have at your work or other relationships.
Yeah, I think cultivate is a good word there, right? Because it kind of establishes that it's not just like a thing that happens magically. It's a thing that you have to go out of your way to make sure that that occurs, right? You have to set the stage. You have to talk to people about that, and then you can get there. Because it's also especially hard for new junior people to be the person to bring up the problem, to be the person to go talk to the manager and everything. We're talking about people who are probably scared to ask a question for their first few weeks. And they don't necessarily even know what a toxic work environment looks like. They can't tell, like, is this just how things are? So there's like, again, a lot of learning that goes into that. So like putting out the intent to cultivate and making sure that they're like gonna feel comfortable asking those questions and you've like set that stage is again always gonna be super important.
So in one of the things I talked about this in hey, self-promotion, some of my YouTube videos. There you go, TJ, just for you. But like one of the things I've made extremely clear is a lot of my downfalls, a lot of the things that I've done very, very wrong, a lot of the things that I've very, very much so struggled with. And I cannot tell you the amount of private messages I get talking about how I've gotten at least 50 men individually reach out and say like, hey, I've really objectified women. I have a porn addiction. I have these problems. How did you get over it? How did you stop doing this? How did you, like you can't make someone's life better or give them real feedback if you yourself are not willing to be vulnerable in the first place. And so it's modeling weakness, I think, is a good thing. Like I am weak and I'm fine being weak. I'm finite. I mess up. I'm no idol to look up to. This is a fact of life. But I'd rather be honest about my downcomings than to cover it and Instagram reel you my wins, right? Because that crap is just like, that's the true toxic stuff that's going on. Right, that's the thing that's making everyone feel like they have imposter syndrome. That feels super defensive about everything they hear because all feedback is guy that's super glorious driving the PHP Lambo. he's making everyone that's doing PHP feel kind of, like he's bringing down the environment in some sense, right? And so it's real, Sorry, PHP Lambo guy. I'm sure you're probably a fine guy, but you get the idea.
No, I'm so with
Yeah,
that.
for sure. And it also takes it takes a certain amount of like strength and confidence within yourself to be able to be vulnerable in those situations.
Yeah. There's like, that's a lot of what I've learned about with, like, there's these 2 TED Talks they're by Brene Brown on like, they talk about like shame, guilt, and vulnerability, right? Or like the rough topics. And it's like a really, really good TED Talk that like kind of, gives you a really good understanding of a lot of what Prime just said. It can also help you like understand how other people might be feeling in like moments like that. Really, really, really heavily recommend those. Those are the kind of things that you listen to like, once every few years to remind yourself. But yeah, and I know that Prime, you don't like the term psychological safety, but part of my understanding of it was like feeling comfortable being vulnerable in a given scenario, and we talked about this a lot. Well, I did at my like original startup where it was 3 co-founders and we were doing restaurant stuff. And it was like a very emotional experience of like, how can I tell my co-founders that I'm feeling depressed? Like, can I tell my co-founders I'm not feeling well? Or will they freak out? Right? Or will they be like mad at me for feeling that? Psychological safety is me feeling as though this is a safe space for me to say that. Hate to use those 2 words in that order. I know it's triggering for a lot of people, but like, this is a place where I can say that and it's not going to like come back to bite me. It's not going to be viewed as a bad thing. It's going to just be viewed as a thing that like we all got to figure out how to work on, And that's not always a thing that you have, Like you might not always feel able to have those conversations. That's how you know that you don't have the psychological safety. So I agree with Bash a little bit, right? There's the side of you, like I have to feel comfortable myself just being able to be vulnerable and talk about my stuff. There's also the side of like, I need to make sure that the environment I'm in is an environment where that'll be received, right? And that's the part of it that's kind of outside of my control. Is like, I can know I want to say all these things and I want to share them, but I can't guarantee that they're going to be heard well. And that's part of like the environment you have to cultivate. Back to kind of what Teach said.
Totally. And sometimes people are going to be unwilling to do that. And then either, depending on your situation, you have to like suck it up, which sucks, right? But like sometimes life is difficult, or you find some other place to work, or you shield yourself from those things, or like whatever it is. And that's just like, that's unfortunate, right? I'm not saying that that's good. My like hope is that people can be empowered to have that maturity and strength within themselves, that even in that situation they're able to like still survive and hopefully thrive, even if like the rest of their team is going to be jerks. Like, you know what I mean? That's like what I want people to be able to do. But it is more productive and better to have the environment you're talking about. 100% agreed.
Yeah. And so that's why a lot of what I say is like, well, if we're going to talk about how to give feedback, right? If we're going to talk about like how to act around, newer people or other people, then that means you're probably in a more senior position, or you're probably in a more manager position, or at least you have a report of some sort. And that means that you have the chance to be the person to cultivate, And so it's like, if we're going to talk about what does good feedback look like, that means that we have the opportunity to give good feedback, like we have the opportunity to kind of start making things the way that we would like them to be, as opposed to just hoping they are that way.
Well, I feel like we've covered all the things, and anything else would probably be too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
think this was great, though.
Happy with this.
Yeah.
This is a good talk.
Yeah.
I'm glad we did this.
Rox,
Yeah.
you did great.
Yeah,
See, you
good
can
job,
trust
Rox.
that I
Yeah.
mean that, because I also will tell you if I don't like something you do.
You can
Yeah.
trust that I mean that, because yesterday I DM'd you and I said I hate you when you're ugly.
He did.
No,
Did
you not see the
screenshotted
tweet
me.
I sent to you today? I thought that one was
I
really
did.
good.
It was really funny. For those of you who don't follow Tej on Twitter, well, for those of you who don't follow everyone on Twitter, but follow Tej on Twitter. Tej is the funniest person on Twitter alive. I
Rox,
swear
literally,
to God.
I get a recommendation in my feed that's Rox liking about how to do this database migration, like if you have heavy load, and then I tag Rox and reply, "Hey Rox, I noticed you like this, but don't worry, I don't think this will ever be a concern for you."
Yeah. He was like,
good.
I don't think you needed to like this tweet. It's like, okay, thanks, Tej. I get it.
Well, that's because I was saying more because like you're already Kubernetes genius and you
True,
went viral
true.
on that. So I know
Accurate
that
and
you're
correct.
a KH genius. Yeah.
Yes.
So I
yes.
figured that was why. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it stands for help me please, but it's PLS for the 8. Okay, cool.
That's the 8.
All right, so
Wait,
I guess
have you
that's it
tweeted
for our
that one because that's really
thing.
good. Rox.
That is
Yeah, that
really
was one of
good.
my
You should just tweet that
replies
one.
to the.
No,
okay.
just tweet it now.
What
Just
am I
tweet
about?
it
You want me
right
to just
now.
read-
Like I don't
tweet
care.
that by itself.
Yeah, tweet it,
Okay,
link it in the
fine.
chat, and everyone will like it.
Okay, while I'm doing
No,
this,
beat trash. Don't let trash beat you to this. He'll
And
steal
Trash
it.
is just like, what's he gonna tweet? I can tweet it.
I can take that. I can take that. This is
Look
my
at the
content.
timestamp.
This is
Look at
our
the
tweet.
timestamp. You know.
Kubernetes
Okay.
K8S stands for help me please. There you go.
Thanks for
Nice.
chatting, guys. I feel like this was
Yeah.
like kind of a is it a touchy topic? Like maybe a bit of a
Definitely.
touchy topic for some people.
I feel like a
It's
lot of
not
people.
really-
I mean, I think people take it. I think this topic really reveals how you take feedback.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Really.
But I
And also, if
appreciate
you've been super burned by people
Yeah.
either always nice feedback or being like complete jerks when they're giving feedback, right? So it's like there's also that situation where you're bringing your past into it about how people have given you feedback in the past.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. True.
yeah.
I
we
have a
learned
lot of
today.
respect. Yeah, good job everyone for like just speaking your truth on the internet despite what how other people might react to that. I feel like it's important to have these conversations anyway and like still be sharing our thoughts. Otherwise we all just sound like this monotone of like, no, it's fine. Just like anyway. Good job, everyone.
Okay. We did it. Put some good out into the world. All right.
Yeah.
Everybody, !prime, !bash, !tej in the chat. Make sure to follow everybody. Guys, if you want to post like your YouTube links or anything, feel free to shill really quick, or you want to post your Twitters or anything, feel free to dump links in there.
I already did in Prime's chat today, so
Yeah.
I think I'm
nice.
set.
TJ's
Amazing.
killing it today.
Cool. I'm gonna throw up.
Okay, actually, I do
Amazing.
have one good tweet though today, so I'll post it in chat right now.
There you go. Post your one good tweet. I'm gonna throw up a raid to Finite Singularity. Pretty good guy.
The
oh
Fire
yeah,
Soul
thank you for
has come in
everybody
with
who-
2,000 bits, by the way. You need to give that man a thank
That's
you.
actually
Okay.
as of
Yeah.
now 3,000. So I was about to say.
Ooh, I missed one.
Yeah.
Sheesh.
Thank you for all of the bits that I think.
Oh,
Yeah. Thank you for all the bits. Thank you for all the follows. And the
Can you look at your
subscriptions towards
tweet
the
really
beginning.
quickly?
Can I look
Can
at my
you bring your
tweet
tweet
really
on screen?
quickly?
Yeah, just bring
Can I
your
bring it
tweet
on screen? Oh,
screen
no.
really quickly.
Yeah. Okay.
Can you look at what can you look at my response? Just give it a nice little quick
Mhm.
refresh.
I like it. Top tier response.
It's just his own Twitch link. New Prime meta. He just
Got him.
comments his own
Nice.
Twitch link on everything.
Sweet. I'll do the same thing. I'm gonna post just a quote tweet myself for the tweet that I thought was funny today. Thanks, Prime.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
refresh again,
Everybody
Rox,
just
refresh
comment
again.
your own shill links on the tweet.
Or everyone
Amazing.
just comment mine. It'd be great. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Cool.
Sweet. Thanks,
All right.
Rox.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, chat,
Yeah.
for your
Rox.
listening
chat,
and
for being
feedback while we were
awesome.
talking.
Yeah, thank you all for
You
the
just ruined
feedback.
my
I didn't
screen.
read any of it, but appreciate it.
All right.
Have fun.